I'm a 31-year-old woman, married to my husband Daniel, who's 33. We've been together for 6 years, married for 3, and live just 20 minutes away from his mother, Patricia. She's 62, opinionated, and has a way of turning every family gathering into a performance about how things used to be done. Since our wedding, I've hosted every major holiday: Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. I'm not a perfectionist, but I like things organized. I plan menus, check dietary needs, decorate early, and make sure everyone feels welcome. It worked for a while. Then Patricia decided that my style was too formal. At first it was small things. She'd rearrange centerpieces after I'd finished setting the table. She'd open the oven to peek inside and check my timing, saying she just wanted to help. Guests would laugh it off. I tried to laugh too, but each year her comments got louder. Last Easter was the breaking point. We had family from out of town sitting down for brunch when Patricia suddenly got up and began moving the seating cards I'd placed earlier. She wanted Daniel's cousins to sit closer to their side and started pulling chairs mid-meal. I asked her calmly to stop. People were eating. She looked around, smiled sweetly, and announced, "Emily's being controlling again." Everyone froze. Daniel tried to brush it off, telling me later that his mom didn't mean it that way. But the moment replayed in my head all night. I wasn't angry as much as I was done, so I told him, if I'm such a control freak, maybe someone else should take the reins next time. The next morning, Patricia jumped at the opportunity. She said she'd host Thanksgiving herself this year. "It'll be simple and authentic," she bragged, as if I'd been running a corporate event instead of a dinner table. I smiled, handed her my spreadsheets, recipes, and grocery lists, and told her she could take full charge. Daniel hesitated. He's a peacekeeper by nature, and I could see the worry in his face. He asked if I was sure. I told him yes. If Patricia thought my way was too much, she could show us how it should really be done. A few days later, she was already deep in planning mode. She started a family group chat, renamed it Patricia's Thanksgiving, and began sending mixed messages, changing menus, switching dates, and confusing everyone. One day she said she'd make everything from scratch. The next, she mentioned ordering half the meal. Her messages came with questions that made no sense. How many people eat bread? Do we have any of those big plates Emily used? I stayed quiet and redirected anything logistical to Daniel. I had work deadlines anyway, and honestly, it was easier to just let her manage. A week later, I began getting polite messages from relatives. "Is your mother-in-law okay? She seems overwhelmed." I replied that Patricia was hosting this year and that I was sure she had everything under control. Patricia, meanwhile, started telling people I'd abandoned her to deal with everything alone, conveniently skipping the part where she demanded to take over. I kept my distance. She wanted control. She'd have it, start to finish. By the time Thanksgiving week arrived, she still hadn't finalized the grocery list. Daniel mentioned that his mom had mixed up the catering order twice and was panicking about oven space. I just told him to remind her gently that she was in charge. That night, as I checked my calendar, I realized I hadn't had a single stress headache all month. For the first time in years, the holidays were quiet. And somewhere across town, Patricia was discovering that hosting isn't as simple or as authentic as she thought. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Patricia was more confident than ever. She told everyone she had things under control, though nothing was actually ready. Her phone calls to Daniel started early each morning. Questions about turkey weight, table sizes, and what kind of butter to buy. He'd hang up shaking his head, realizing his mom hadn't written any of it down. She had lists scattered across sticky notes and envelopes. When Daniel stopped by her house to help, she had 3 different grocery lists on the counter and still managed to forget half the basics. Emily offered to review the menu once, just to check for missing items, but Patricia brushed her off, saying she wasn't running a competition. Within days, the cracks started showing. Patricia forgot to invite Daniel's cousin's family, who had attended every holiday before. They found out through a mutual friend and sent Daniel a confused message asking if plans had changed. When he asked his mom, she said she must have assumed they weren't coming this year. That small mistake set off a quiet chain of frustration through the family chat. To save time, Patricia decided to order a few dishes from a local caterer: mashed potatoes, pies, and rolls. She mentioned it proudly, saying she'd focus on the main dishes, but she never confirmed the pickup time or checked their holiday hours. The restaurant closed the day before Thanksgiving, something she didn't realize until it was too late. Her main plan was even worse. She bought 3 frozen turkeys, each weighing over 15 pounds, and told everyone she'd cook them all at once because it'll save time. When Daniel tried to explain oven space and cooking times, she waved him off. She was sure they'd cook faster together. The promised plates and cutlery she'd mentioned were in her basement turned out to be boxes of old mismatched plastic ones from decades ago, some still sticky with old residue. She shrugged and said she'd make it work. Meanwhile, Emily stayed out of it completely. She focused on finishing a big project at work and booked a weekend trip with friends for the weekend after Thanksgiving. Daniel didn't argue. He was already stretched thin from managing his mom's confusion. As the holiday neared, relatives began sending Emily careful messages, asking if she planned to help or coordinate behind the scenes. She politely replied that Patricia was hosting and she was respecting that. Some understood. Others sent hesitant emojis or long pauses before replying. The following weekend, Daniel came home from another chaotic shopping trip with his mom. She had sent him out for supplies but forgot half the essentials. No butter, no salt, no baking powder. When he mentioned it, Patricia blamed the store layout. He spent the rest of the day running back and forth fixing her mistakes. By now, Patricia had told everyone to expect 20 guests. She announced that she'd add modern twists to classic dishes, but no one understood what that meant. She spoke in vague terms about upgrading traditional recipes, leaving everyone guessing whether they'd be eating turkey or tofu. The weather added another layer of trouble. A snowstorm warning was issued for the week of Thanksgiving, with icy roads expected. Most families suggested postponing or scaling down. Patricia refused. She sent a message to the group saying everyone should show up no matter what, claiming she'd already done too much planning to cancel. Daniel tried to reason with her but got nowhere. He mentioned hiring help or simplifying the menu. She told him not to interfere, saying she didn't need anyone's approval. When he got home that evening, he looked exhausted. Emily poured him a cup of tea and told him she wasn't getting involved. He needed to let his mother handle it herself. The weekend before Thanksgiving, Patricia made one last attempt to impress everyone. She sent out a message listing her new menu: 3 turkeys, 2 pies, and creative side dishes. The message ended with, "You'll all be amazed." It sounded more like a warning than a promise. On the night before Thanksgiving, the house was quiet. Emily had already packed for her post-holiday trip. Daniel was scrolling through messages when his phone rang. It was his mother, frantic. The turkeys were still frozen solid. She'd left them in the garage to thaw, not realizing the temperature had dropped below freezing all week. Daniel paced the living room while Patricia ranted about how nothing was cooking on time. Emily, already in bed, listened from the next room. After a long pause, Daniel walked in and asked what to do. She looked at him calmly and said, "She wanted control. Now she has it." He didn't argue. He just sat down beside her, realizing that for the first time, his mother's chaos wasn't something they had to fix. Across town, Patricia stood in her kitchen, surrounded by frozen turkeys, unopened cans, and a stack of paper plates that still smelled faintly of old plastic. Thanksgiving hadn't even started yet, and the disaster had already begun. Thanksgiving morning started with the phone ringing nonstop. Daniel's name flashed again and again until he finally answered. Patricia was in full panic. The turkeys were still solid, hard as ice. She had tried running hot water over one in the sink, which only made the outside rubbery while the inside stayed frozen. It was 8 in the morning, and guests were already on their way. By the time the first cars pulled up, the house was filled with chaos. The air smelled of stress and burnt butter instead of food. Counters were covered with half-open cans, sticky spoons, and spilled flour. Pots boiled over, leaving a trail across the stove. The kitchen timer beeped endlessly while Patricia ran between the oven and the table, muttering about how real families didn't need everything perfect. Daniel tried to help where he could, but she pushed him away. Every suggestion was brushed off. When he pointed out that one casserole looked overcooked, she snapped that that's how it's supposed to brown. He stepped back and focused on greeting relatives at the door, trying to buy her time. People arrived expecting the usual warmth. Emily's dinners had a reputation. The candles always matched the napkins, the house smelled like roasted herbs, and everything started on time. This year, the living room looked like a staging area. Coats were piled in corners, dishes were unfinished, and there wasn't a single thing ready to eat. By noon, the first turkey had gone into the oven, but the other 2 were still thawing on the counter. The tablecloth looked wrinkled, and the plates were a mismatched collection of old floral patterns. Patricia had found them in boxes from the basement, still dusty around the edges. Relatives exchanged looks across the table as they waited. Some tried to help by setting out drinks or folding napkins, but Patricia waved them off. She insisted she had it under control. At 12:30, Daniel's phone rang again. It was the catering company calling to confirm the order cancellation. Patricia had never paid the deposit, and the store had closed early for the holiday. The woman on the line sounded apologetic, but the message was clear. There'd be no backup meal coming. Daniel quietly stepped outside to call Emily. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm. He told her the situation. She didn't sound surprised. She only said, "Support her. Don't rescue her." Inside, the smell of smoke was getting stronger. The oven was smoking from dripped turkey juices that had hit the bottom pan. Patricia grabbed towels, trying to fan it away, but ended up opening all the windows in the middle of the freezing wind. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen was a disaster. One turkey was burned on top but raw underneath. The other 2 sat half-thawed and leaking onto the counter. The stuffing was oversalted, and the mashed potatoes looked more like soup. Someone finally ordered pizza for the kids, and within minutes, the adults joined in, pretending it was fun and different. Patricia paced around, blaming the oven temperature, the grocery store, even Daniel for not helping right. When one of Daniel's aunts gently pointed out that Emily had always handled things smoothly, Patricia turned sharp. She accused Emily of sabotage, claiming the recipes were wrong or the cookware was mislabeled. Her sister quickly shut it down, reminding her that she had demanded to host. The room went quiet. While all of that unfolded, Emily's day was the opposite. She stayed home, baked a single pumpkin pie, and kept the house spotless. The only noise came from soft music in the background and the hum of the oven. It felt strange not to be part of the chaos, but peaceful in its own way. As night fell, Daniel's family began leaving one by one. They offered polite hugs, thanked Patricia for trying something new, and gave Daniel sympathetic looks as they slipped out early. Paper plates clattered in the trash, and the half-eaten turkey went untouched. By the time Daniel got home, he looked like he'd just returned from a storm. He dropped his coat, sat at the kitchen counter, and told Emily what had happened. Patricia's confidence had evaporated halfway through the day, and even her closest relatives had stopped defending her. He said his mother finally saw, with her own eyes, just how much Emily had done all those years, without ever complaining. Emily listened quietly while he talked. She slid a slice of pie across the table toward him, and he smiled for the first time that day. The silence between them didn't need filling. Everything had already been said. The next morning, Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. It was short, "Maybe next year you can host again." Emily took the phone, looked at the text, and typed a reply herself. "Only if everyone agrees I'm not controlling." She sent it and handed the phone back. No response came for a long while. Hours later, Daniel checked again. Patricia had seen the message but hadn't replied. For the first time, there was nothing left to argue about. Across town, her kitchen still smelled faintly of smoke and regret. And for the first time in years, Thanksgiving had taught everyone exactly who kept that family from falling apart by doing absolutely nothing at all. The weekend after Thanksgiving was unusually quiet. Daniel didn't call his mom, and Patricia didn't reach out either. Their group chat, usually full of leftover photos and family jokes, stayed completely silent. It was like everyone was pretending the day hadn't happened. By Monday, the silence broke, but not in the way anyone expected. Daniel's cousin sent him a message with a screenshot from the family group chat. Patricia had posted a long paragraph explaining that technical issues had ruined Thanksgiving. She blamed the oven, the store, and the weather. She called it a one-time mishap. What she didn't mention was the frozen turkeys, the burned casserole, or the pizza boxes stacked in her trash. Within a day, her version of events made its way through the family. But people weren't buying it. At church that Sunday, someone joked to Daniel's aunt about Patricia's Thanksgiving miracle, saying they heard she'd reinvented the holiday with smoke and delivery pizza. The story spread fast, and Patricia's embarrassment grew louder than any apology she could have given. When Daniel stopped by her house to return a dish, he found her trying to act normal. She offered him leftover cranberry sauce, pretending nothing was wrong. But the tension was thick. She mentioned that next time, things will be better. Daniel didn't argue, but when he got home, he told me she looked shaken, like she'd finally realized people saw through the excuses. I didn't respond much. I'd already decided not to get pulled into the cycle again. When relatives called asking for my side, I simply told them Patricia had done her best and that I wasn't going to discuss it further. That seemed to frustrate her more than anything. 2 weeks later, Christmas talk began. Normally by that time, Patricia would have sent detailed group messages about themes, dress codes, and side dishes. This year, the chat was empty. No one volunteered to host, and Patricia didn't mention a thing. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen. Then one evening, Daniel's sister Claire called me. She said the family wanted a calm, simple Christmas, something small and relaxed. She asked if I'd be willing to host it at our place, just for close relatives. I agreed on one condition. Patricia could come only as a guest. No planning, no managing, no suggestions. Claire said that was fair. When Daniel told his mother, she hesitated at first, but eventually said she'd come. She even offered to bring dessert, which was progress compared to her usual need to control everything. The weeks leading up to Christmas were peaceful. I kept things minimal. No complicated recipes, no over-decorating. I focused on making it comfortable. When relatives asked how they could help, I actually let them. Claire handled drinks, Daniel took care of the main dishes, and our cousins offered to bring desserts. It was the first time I didn't have to coordinate everything myself. The day before Christmas Eve, Patricia dropped by to deliver her dessert early, a pecan pie in a glass dish. She lingered at the doorway longer than usual, glancing around the living room. She noticed how calm everything looked. No last-minute rush, no piles of prep, no charts on the fridge. She didn't say anything about it, but I could tell she noticed. She handed me the pie and left quietly. On Christmas Eve, the house filled with laughter and the smell of roasting food. Relatives arrived early, bringing trays of food and small gifts. Daniel handled the oven, Claire arranged drinks, and everyone moved easily around each other. Patricia arrived right on time, wearing a red dress and carrying a box of cookies. She walked in slowly, scanning the room. For the first half hour, she stayed quiet, watching. She stood near the kitchen counter while others chatted around her. Every time she reached to adjust something, someone else already had it handled. Eventually, she gave up trying to direct and joined a conversation with her sister. Dinner started exactly on time. The food was hot, the table simple but cozy. Halfway through the meal, one of Daniel's uncles commented that everything felt smooth this year. A few people nodded. Claire smiled and said it was nice not to stress about anything. Patricia didn't reply, but she didn't need to. The difference was obvious to everyone. When dinner ended, Daniel made a small toast, thanking everyone for helping, and mentioned how great it felt to share responsibilities. It wasn't aimed at anyone, but Patricia looked down at her plate. The room stayed warm but quieter for a moment. After dessert, people lingered, laughing and cleaning up together. Patricia offered to help wash dishes, something she'd never done before. She stayed later than usual, chatting softly with Daniel and Claire near the tree. When she left, she gave Daniel a small hug and said she'd see us soon. That night, when the house was empty, Daniel sat down and said he finally understood. He said that what happened at Thanksgiving wasn't just about food, it was about control. His mom had to lose it completely to see what balance looked like. Over the next week, small changes started to appear. Patricia sent shorter texts, no long instructions, no guilt trips. She shared a recipe with me and wrote, "You'd probably make this better." It was the closest thing to humility I'd ever seen from her. For once, there were no dramatic phone calls, no family whispers, no tension brewing under the surface. People started treating holidays like something to enjoy, not survive. And all it took was one overcooked turkey, one burned casserole, and one quiet boundary that stayed exactly where it needed to be. By the time spring rolled around, everyone in the family had quietly accepted a new rhythm. Patricia wasn't running things anymore. The group chat stayed friendly but short, no long instructions, no unsolicited advice. It was subtle, but the change was real. When Easter came, Claire offered to host. Patricia volunteered to bring a side dish and arrived right on time with a store-bought salad, a first for her. The lunch was calm, easy, and unremarkable, in the best possible way. That piece didn't go unnoticed. Daniel's uncle even joked that Patricia must have retired from management. She smiled politely but didn't argue. By summer, she'd started asking small questions about recipes, seating, even flower colors, but always framed as curiosity, not control. It was strange watching her tread carefully around topics she used to dominate. Then as fall approached, talk about Thanksgiving began again. Everyone assumed Claire would host this time, but she had work commitments that made it impossible. There was an awkward silence in the chat until someone asked if I'd consider taking it on again. I said yes, on one condition: I'd plan it entirely my way, no interference. Daniel backed me immediately. Patricia responded with a thumbs up emoji. It looked harmless, but we both knew it was her way of agreeing without fully surrendering. From the start, I kept things simple: 1 main dish, 3 sides, and desserts people could bring themselves. I set a schedule, shared a list of what I needed help with, and kept everyone updated. Patricia offered to host it at her house for space, but I turned that down. I said it'd be at ours, and she'd be a guest like everyone else. In the days before Thanksgiving, she called Daniel once to ask if I needed her silver serving dishes. He told her no, we already had everything covered. She didn't push. When the day arrived, the house looked warm and relaxed. Candles flickered on the table, and laughter carried from the kitchen to the living room. People came early just to talk. The food came out hot, the table looked clean but cozy, and for once no one was rushing. Patricia showed up on time, wearing a neat gray coat and holding a pie box. She paused in the doorway like she wasn't sure where to fit in. Daniel greeted her, took her coat, and guided her to the table. For the first hour, she hovered quietly, making small comments about how calm everything seemed. Then, as the meal started, she noticed something different. No one looked to her for approval. People thanked me directly, complimented the food, and moved easily around the table. She didn't correct anyone, didn't rearrange anything, didn't even touch the napkins. Halfway through dinner, Claire mentioned that this was the smoothest Thanksgiving in years. Her husband nodded and added that the house felt lighter somehow. The comment landed in the middle of the table, and everyone laughed softly except Patricia, who stayed quiet. When dessert came out, Daniel made a small toast. He thanked everyone for helping, then looked at me and said he appreciated how much effort it took to keep things running smoothly year after year. The table went quiet for a moment, and Patricia looked down at her plate. It wasn't harsh or humiliating, it was just honest. After dinner, the cousins offered to help clean up, and no one refused. The kitchen filled with quiet teamwork, stacking plates, rinsing glasses, wrapping leftovers. Patricia stood by the counter, clearly unsure what to do. Then she picked up a towel and started drying dishes. No one said anything, but the gesture didn't go unnoticed. Later that evening, when most of the guests had left, Patricia lingered behind. She walked through the dining room, looking at the empty table, the spotless counters, the calm space that used to be her stage. She told Daniel she'd head home early, gave him a quick hug, and left without saying much else. A few days later, Daniel mentioned that his mother had stopped by his sister's house to drop off leftovers. Apparently, she'd told Claire that the holiday went surprisingly well, and that it was nice seeing things run smoothly without stress. It was her version of a compliment, but we both knew what she meant. As December arrived, something even more unexpected happened. Patricia started suggesting a shared hosting rotation, each sibling taking one holiday per year. She said it during a casual group call, almost like an afterthought. Nobody argued. Everyone agreed immediately. That winter, she sent a message to the group chat with her contribution list for Christmas: cookies and drinks. No master plan, no paragraphs of rules, just a simple list. At the Christmas gathering, she arrived early again, this time with a box of homemade cookies and a small wrapped gift for me, a new baking dish. She said it would be good for the pies everyone likes. I thanked her, and she didn't add anything else. Dinner that night was even easier than Thanksgiving. No tension, no second guessing. Everyone laughed, kids ran around the tree, and Patricia sat on the couch with Claire, telling stories about holidays when Daniel and his sister were little. The difference was clear. She was part of the room, not the center of it. After dessert, Daniel leaned over and said quietly that this was the first time he'd seen his mom actually enjoying a holiday instead of performing one. He was right. She looked peaceful, not pressured. When everyone left, she hugged me before going and said she'd see us soon. It was short, but genuine. For the first time since I'd married into that family, the balance had shifted completely. The same woman who once accused me of controlling everything was now content to let go, and the family was better for it. The new year came quietly. For the first time in a long time, the calendar didn't look like a list of family obligations. No long chains of messages, no tension about who was in charge. Patricia stayed polite and distant, sending short texts about recipes or weather updates. It was polite, almost formal, but it worked. By January, the embarrassment from her failed Thanksgiving had faded, replaced with something closer to awareness. She hadn't apologized directly, but her behavior had changed enough that no one needed her to. When she did call Daniel, the conversation stayed brief. Updates about the neighborhood, a funny story from church, or something she saw on the news. The difference was clear. One afternoon, Daniel mentioned that Patricia had called to ask about hosting duties for the upcoming year. Instead of assuming control, she suggested that everyone take turns officially. Claire could handle Easter, we could do Thanksgiving, and the rest could rotate between cousins. It was practical and surprisingly fair. Daniel agreed immediately, and the plan was set. In early February, a card arrived in the mail addressed to both of us. Inside was one of Patricia's old family recipe cards, the handwriting neat and careful. Below the ingredients, she'd written a short note: "Maybe you'll make it better." It wasn't dramatic, but it said everything it needed to. I mailed a reply thanking her for sharing it and wrote that I'd make sure the recipe stayed in the family. Over the next few weeks, her tone continued to shift. She started calling once in a while, not for help, but for small things like checking if a store had good deals on cookware or asking about my garden. They were ordinary, almost friendly conversations. By spring, Claire hosted Easter again. The day went smoothly, with everyone bringing a dish or two. Patricia showed up early carrying a tray of lemon bars. She handed them to Claire, complimented the setup, and sat down without rearranging a single thing. When dinner ended, she helped pack leftovers, laughed with the kids, and didn't correct anyone once. It was the calmest holiday the family had ever had. As summer came around, the family began to settle into the new normal. Patricia hosted a small birthday gathering for Daniel's uncle in her backyard. She planned it modestly, simple food, music, and folding chairs. When people complimented the setup, she credited her daughter and me for giving her good ideas. It was strange hearing her admit that out loud, but no one made it awkward. A few months later, Daniel mentioned that Patricia had started helping at her local community center, organizing small holiday events. She said she enjoyed it because there was no family pressure, just teamwork. It made sense. She'd finally found a space where she could lead without clashing with anyone. As Thanksgiving approached again, people began asking about plans. The group chat came alive with messages about who was bringing what, but no one argued. Everyone remembered last year's peace and wanted to keep it that way. I volunteered to host again, and Patricia offered to bring dessert. This time, she even asked if there was anything she could prepare ahead of time. When the day came, everything went smoothly. The meal was simple, the laughter steady, and the atmosphere light. Patricia arrived on time with 2 pies and a calm smile. She complimented the table, set her desserts down, and joined the conversation without trying to run anything. At one point, she told Daniel's cousins that holidays felt easier when everyone worked together. It wasn't a confession, but it was close enough. After dinner, while everyone chatted and picked at leftovers, Patricia quietly started helping clean up. She handed out storage containers, covered dishes, and even packed food for people to take home. She didn't need attention. She just blended into the rhythm. When she finally sat down, she looked content watching everyone move around without her direction. The following weekend, she invited Daniel and me to her place for coffee. It wasn't unusual, but it was rare for her to ask both of us together. When we arrived, she had already set out mugs and a small plate of cookies. She told us she wanted to plan her birthday gathering in the summer and asked if we'd help her make a guest list. Instead of dictating the event, she handed over a notebook and said she didn't want to do it alone. She even asked what we thought about hiring a caterer instead of cooking everything herself. It was a small thing, but it showed how much had changed. When the day of her birthday came, she greeted everyone at the door but didn't hover. The party went smoothly, light music, small speeches, and no drama. When she raised her glass for a short toast, she thanked everyone who'd helped her keep things simple this time. She looked toward Daniel and smiled, then glanced at me and said, "And for reminding me that teamwork works better than control." The room clapped softly, and that was it. No grand apology, no awkward silence, just quiet acknowledgement and moving forward. Later that night, when Daniel and I were cleaning up, he mentioned how different it all felt. He said his mom seemed lighter, like she'd finally stopped carrying something she didn't need to. I agreed. For the first time, holidays weren't a competition or a performance. They were just moments that came and went peacefully. By Christmas that year, Patricia had turned into the relative everyone actually looked forward to seeing. She still brought too much dessert, still told long stories, but she did it without the need to control anyone. When she left that night, she hugged me and said the family finally felt like a family again. It took one disaster, a little distance, and a lot of silence for things to fall into place. But somehow, that was exactly what it needed. A full year passed after Patricia's Thanksgiving meltdown, and for the first time, every season came and went without tension. Holidays stopped being projects and turned into something simple again. The messages in the family chat stayed short and light, no long paragraphs or last-minute demands. It felt like the whole family had exhaled. By Easter, everyone had settled into the new hosting rotation. Claire took her turn, keeping things modest with brunch and an outdoor setup. Patricia arrived early, holding a tray of homemade rolls. She mentioned she'd tested the recipe twice, just to be safe, which made everyone laugh instead of cringe. The day moved smoothly, the food came out on time, the conversation stayed easy, and no one raised their voice. When Daniel and I drove home that evening, the car stayed quiet for a few minutes before he spoke. He said he hadn't realized how much stress his mother used to cause until it disappeared. I told him that sometimes peace doesn't need credit, it just needs space. He nodded and didn't say anything else the whole drive home. A few weeks later, Patricia called with an unexpected request. Her 63rd birthday was coming up, and she wanted to plan a small garden gathering for family and neighbors. She asked if I'd help her make it happen. I agreed, but only if she managed her own checklist and timing. She agreed right away. When the day came, everything was ready. Tables were set in the backyard under string lights. Food was simple but well organized, and she even had a playlist running through small speakers. People mingled comfortably. No chaos, no shouting, no last-minute panic. When it came time for toasts, Patricia raised her glass and thanked those who keep this family grounded. Her glance landed on me for just a second before moving on, but it said more than any speech could. That night, after everyone left, Daniel mentioned that letting his mom face her own disaster had done what years of arguments never could. He said she finally understood without being embarrassed into it. He called it the cleanest lesson she'd ever learned. As summer went on, Patricia began reaching out more, but differently. She'd text asking to meet for coffee, always keeping it casual. The first time we met, she admitted that she used to feel replaced when I became the center of family planning. She said it wasn't about holidays, it was about not feeling needed. I told her that teamwork had always been the goal. Traditions worked best when everyone had a role, not just one person trying to prove a point. She didn't defend herself, just nodded slowly and changed the subject. By autumn, the new pattern had become natural. Everyone took turns hosting. The group chat turned into a space for coordination, not control. People shared recipes, volunteered early, and no one complained. When Daniel's aunt hosted Thanksgiving that year, Patricia showed up with a single casserole, a bottle of wine, and a smile. She didn't try to rearrange anything or question timing. She walked straight to the kitchen, complimented the smell, and offered to help without taking over. Dinner went perfectly. There was laughter, good food, and no one waiting on anyone else. When it ended, Patricia thanked the host and called the night beautiful. It was simple, but it was the first time those words had come from her without a hidden critique. Later that evening, as everyone relaxed around the living room, Patricia sat beside me on the couch. The kids were laughing on the floor and the sound filled the room. She spoke quietly, saying she used to believe that control showed love, that being in charge proved she mattered. I told her that sometimes love is stepping back and trusting things to go well without you. She nodded and didn't argue. After a while, she said she finally understood. She looked across the room at Daniel, at Claire, and at her cousins all talking at once. The scene was loud and ordinary, but for once there was no pressure to make it perfect. December arrived quickly, and Patricia surprised everyone again. She suggested the family make the hosting rotation permanent, so everyone shared the work equally. She even joked that at least now they knew who to call if something needed rescuing. It wasn't a jab this time, it was an honest compliment. When Christmas came, Claire hosted again. The living room glowed with soft lights and quiet conversation. Patricia arrived early to help set the table, following instructions instead of giving them. She passed out small gifts, homemade cookies wrapped neatly in ribbon, and handed one to me with a smile. Dinner went off without a single issue. People laughed, played games, and lingered long after dessert. Daniel leaned over at one point and whispered that he never thought the day would come when his mom could just enjoy a holiday. I told him that sometimes people learn when you stop teaching them. Before leaving that night, Patricia hugged me and said she hoped next year would be just as peaceful. She didn't need to apologize or explain anything. It was already understood. That Christmas marked something permanent. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic closures, just an ordinary night where everyone finally got along. Looking around that room, watching a family that used to be split by control finally find balance, I realized something simple. Peace doesn't come from making things perfect. It comes from letting people learn their limits and trusting them not to repeat the same mistake twice.